How's it going, guys? Welcome to the podcast. I know you've been hearing YouTubers, podcasters, and all these Instagram people telling you for years to follow and subscribe and pay to their Patreon and all these different things for years now. But I just want to say that a simple subscribe, which takes maybe 3 to 5 seconds max, does genuinely make a monster-sized difference to us creators. For someone like me, it's just more ammo to pitch into an email to send to these people and their teams to help them come on the show and provide value to them. So honestly, just a little subscribe makes a monster difference and it really, really helps out. So if you do enjoy the episode today, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It makes a massive difference. I'm not going to take up any more of your time. Enjoy the episode. Let's get going. How's it going, guys? Welcome to episode 119 of Talk4, the Quickfire podcast, where we ask 4 great questions to unique and interesting people. Behind the mic today is your host, Louis Skupien. That's me. Let me introduce our very special guest for today, Andrew Sispoidis, who's going to be answering some questions today. So, Andrew, how you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Louis, thank you for having me on. I'm doing really well. I'm excited to be here, and I'm ready to fire away whatever questions I'm ready to tackle.
It's going to be good. And yeah, I mean, looking at your stuff, it's one of those topics, one of those subjects that I'm really interested in. I know the guests are, they've spoken about it before, some of the people we've had on, and I know that the audience just love to dig into this stuff. It's really interesting. So can't wait to get into it. But to kind of introduce you, we always do like a 30 to 60 second elevator pitch. You just met someone at the bar. You got to be quick, get your impression in, those first impressions. So give us a quick pitch on just who you are, what your day job is, and a little kind of mini intro into the life of you. And then we're going to get into some questions and go into it further.
Wonderful. Okay. So basically, I've been an old timer. I guess I could call myself an old timer now. I've been in tech industry for almost 35 years. I started off in late 80s, early 90s, essentially 1990. I kind of put it as a pin. And started off in gaming, specifically early on nascent industry. Got in at the right time, got in with the right people, and developed, our first game that we developed was a game called Pax Imperia. It was a #1 selling space strategy game at the time. It was, kind of a bit of a sensation in a very small industry. Of course, grew up with the industry to some degree. And then from there, I, expanded outside of gaming into kind of more serious applications for kind of leading edge technologies. In that case, it was communications technologies that we kind of inherited from the game industry. So the games, at that point, games were pushing the edge of the envelope technically, and they continue to a large degree today when we see, virtual reality, mixed reality, and augmented reality, and even AI to a large degree has some of its origins in the gaming world. And so, some of the techniques and practices, kind of matured there. So I've been lucky enough. I got to start at the right place. And from there, my career kind of, led me down multiple startups. I've raised, multiple rounds in multiple companies of venture capital. I've kind of invested in other companies as well as acted as an advisor or board member. And so kind of, played that role generally. But my core love really has been and continues to be pushing the edge of technology, and the ability to actually bring technology to the human sphere, essentially, make humanizing, or rather augmenting humanity by incorporating, cutting edge and state of the art technology to help do that.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to unpack there. So why don't we go right into the beginning then? So just kind of talk me through just where that passion comes from then, I guess. So is it something you've always liked as a kid? And I always like to kind of see where people bridge the gap between that passion and then business. So where did you kind of think, hey, I can actually turn what I'm interested in here into a business or go into entrepreneurship? So, where'd you come from? Where's the passion kind of originating from in you? And talk to me about where you kind of turned all of that into business side of things now.
It's a great question. And, it's one, so I think it has two confluences of origins. One is, I grew up in a family where when I was really young, I was 7 years old. My parents moved from Boston to Connecticut because they bought a Dunkin' Donuts franchise. And so when we were, from 7 through teenage years, primarily, we were working, my family, my older brother, my younger brother, myself, my mom and dad, all working at the shop just to kind of, and, they were poor. They came from a very poor background. So I guess it would be three things. One is, their background and growing up around it was a very oral tradition in terms of where my dad grew up. Essentially, he didn't get an education at all. He got maybe the fourth grade education. I didn't wear shoes till he was 17 years old. So came from humble beginnings and, heard all those stories. And they came to the US. They actually did, they did remarkably well. He was a tradesman. He was a printing pressman. And my mom was a seamstress, and they came here. They had multiple jobs, and we grew up. By the time I was 7 years old, and I was the firstborn here. By the time I was 7 years old, they had basically went to buy this Dunkin' Donuts, with the help of the community, with friends. They bought this Dunkin' Donuts, and they started to do very well. It took a long time. And, the whole family, it was a family affair, of course, as these things are. So we learned early on that, work was a core part of life. You just had to work to make things work. But the entrepreneurial spirit, came from that. And from there, my older brother, actually, I have to give him credit for this. He was the tech geek in the family. He was always interested in technology, pulling things apart. Well, I'd pull things apart, he'd have to fix them. So in some sense, there's the symbiosis there. Actually, that lasted for many years. We started multiple companies. My first tech companies, the game company and subsequent companies were, he was a CTO, and we worked together in building these things. So I would say that technology has been a love. And from my perspective, it comes, so between the entrepreneurship side of it and, my perspective tends to be, I don't think of myself as a business person as much as I think of myself as an artist. I see the opportunity that technology is it's an incredible tool that we get to use to bring, I guess the way I define art is the finite pointing to the infinite. And I think that that's what technology is. It's an arrow that kind of can point us to the infinite, provided we do it ethically and the core of my focus now is really about these ethics and kind of doing things right without compromise. If that's kind of a complicated thing to say, but without compromise, doing things as ethically and as soundly and as adherent to human values as possible. That's the long answer to probably a very, very quick question.
No, it makes total sense. And so obviously looking at the website and everything that you're doing and all these different things, one of the big kind of things that crops up and I've seen kind of sneaking around in terms of the wording of things is really just a lot about data privacy and security on the personal level on the internet. So I guess before we kind of dig into where the world's at with all of that, I'm just interested, do you have an experience or is there something that's happened along the line that got you really interested in this? Or is there some sort of a thing that, happened? Because I always find that people, at least typically sometimes people may have had like a negative experience or someone they know had a negative experience with something like this. And then that led them to do this or get this idea or something. So, where does the interest in that come from for you? And then we'll go into where we're at with it.
So that's another great question because it evolved over the years. So I started a company called Axiomate back in 2000, and that was 2000 actually, I think it was 2000, 2001, 2003. And it was the first venture-backed company. I think we ended up raising, I think it was $11.5 million, and it was a Series A. And it was, during a very frothy time, we basically had a little bit more than an idea and a napkin. And when I mentioned earlier the idea of technologies coming out of the gaming world, I had a team of people. I'd sold a game company just prior, a company called Heliotrope Studios, and we had just a really incredible team of people that came out of the defense industry, people that came, just really incredibly smart people. It was a think tank effectively to a large degree. I mean, we weren't working. We were basically thinking about work. We're thinking about really cool ways to incorporate technology into things. And so, the environment was great. The people were great. So I had this about a dozen people that when I sold the company and we're ready to step away and to do something new, I had this idea of creating a next generation communication platform. And that was, early thinking in this area. And so we ended up creating something called OSEA, and that was basically a collaborative communication platform. It got some traction. We started to focus it towards the large corporate environment. It's primarily, decentralized companies rather that had workforces around the world. And again, this is early 2000s. And the idea was to be able to create a scalable communication system that allowed for and this is before cell phones, of course, were present, but PDAs were coming into the world. Video, the internet actually had now gained some real traction, and the idea was, can we create a platform that can unify all of these communication devices simultaneously, concurrently, so that we can scale up or scale down or laterally as much as possible. So we created some incredible technology. And so in the process of doing this, now we started off the company in 2000. By 2001, by September 2001, September 11th happened, and that was a major shift in just the whole mindset in the industry as a whole, and how government plays a role, and all the necessary things that the steps that people had to take, governments had to take to start to understand what happened, for that event. And so we were smack in the middle of all that, because we created a technology that our goal was to make it a vital part of communication. And the idea there was that it had to be private, it had to be secure. And so in the process of doing that, we started to run across the conflict there, which is there's just a trade-off between privacy, security, and national security, as an example. Those became some real issues that we had to start wrestling with. And so those things sat with me for a number of years. Then I got back into the gaming world from a different perspective, creating an in-game advertising company where we delivered media directly into games. It was the largest in-game advertising platform, a company called IGA Worldwide. It was a sector venture-backed company that I had started. We ended up raising $17.5 million for that Series A. Subsequent rounds, I think we ended up raising like $65 million total into that. We had I think 500 million people in the network at any given point in time. It was a bit of this scaled operation, and there again, those things, you started to confront those realities, because ad tech in general, the core drivers in ad tech is just data, understanding the user, who they are, where they are, demographics, psychographics, all that kind of stuff. And so there's just a tension and a conflict there. And the key, as I learned, and then we saw social media evolve. And as I learned over that period of time, and I was involved in all various projects in that area, I got involved in cybersecurity. Because what I saw was social media getting such traction. Now, this is the mid 2000s by this point, in 2008, 2009, 2010, and so on. So basically, I got involved in cybersecurity at the policy level. Essentially, I was invited to participate in multiple rounds of discussion at a very high level with defense, with intelligence, with just public policy related things, and really got a clear vision into kind of how the world is today and where it's going, meaning, social media was going to be here to stay, and that there's an inherent, again, that tension exists. So then I kept on, it's just to that then and to this day, it never sat right with me. I don't think that we have to make the trade-off between privacy and security. I guess that's kind of the big trade-off, or convenience and privacy. I think those are all things that under certain circumstances, we went a certain way, and I think that that's fine. But I think, coming into the new age, when AI is going to start playing a more central role, that's the one place where I think we have the last chance to actually make this difference, to actually create a very high standard when it comes to privacy, security, individual sovereignty, so you have control of your information, all that stuff, as we move into the world with AI, where it's just, data becomes, the whole world will be swallowed up by AI effectively. And I don't inherently think that's a bad thing. But I think that significant negative consequences can come from that in that wrong hands and or under the wrong circumstances. So if we create a very solid, and I could talk more about the details of security side of things, at some point in the conversation, if you'd like.
I'd love to. So I think one of the burning questions I have off the back of all of that is, you've been in this industry for a long time. You've spoken to people in defense and you've worked with them. I guess, me being me, I don't know too many people in the space and stuff, but I guess my general public understanding of all of this is, cookies are, our data basically being shared, and that, it's no big secret nowadays. I know it was scary a while ago and stuff. It doesn't feel like a big secret that you speak or you type something on your phone and then you get ads popping up everywhere, left, right, and center for those things to try and sell you on them. But I guess the question is, how bad is it? And where are we at with all of this nowadays? How dangerous is it? And in your experience, the people you've spoken to and everything, what aren't we taking seriously enough in this industry and stuff? Because, you click yes on the cookies and I don't think people understand what that really means in the wrong hands. So can you kind of give us a little bit of an insight into that?
Sure. So I would, at the highest level, I guess I'd say, kind of in terms of the concept, it's really, really bad. And I don't mean to be a Cassandra and kind of, just, sky is falling, but to some degree that is the truth. And so it's really bad. And it's bad because if we can assure that we have the highest ethical standards that are consistent across all cultures, then I would say that would be fine. Then maybe we can that invasion of privacy. To call it that is probably a strong word, because I don't think it's never, or rather, it is malicious, not necessarily. Most actors in that, meaning state actors or corporate actors, or there's very little malice in anything that gets done there, unless it's adversarial in some sense. But there are adversaries that we have. We being, it's a relative term as well. So we're living in a heterogeneous world, and so. But the idea is there are criminal enterprises, there are proxies, there are state actors. There's all sorts of the elements that play a role in this, and ultimately, where the individual sits is essentially a pawn. So you're connected to me, I'm connected to someone else, that person is connected to something very vital. And if I can trace that and understand what they're connected to, then I can use you as a vector to get to me, to get to this other person, to get to that very vital thing. So that's an example of the kind, very, very broadly, and kind of this is. And again, this is not new. I think people are aware of this, but it's not necessarily just your individual privacy. I mean, another way to look at it is we just went through this massive pandemic, and the idea with what we learned in the pandemic, kind of the whole world learned that there is this knock-on effect. If one herd immunity and the idea of being able, and contagions, those are it's the same principles that apply when it comes to individual security and information security. Now, imagine, for example, if you as an individual, or if you have a family, if you have children, the idea is that in an AI world, that information can not only become weaponized again individually. For example, an AI can now simulate a human voice, can simulate, by hearing this conversation, someone could take this recording, create a digital twin of me and of you, and we can be having a very different conversation being broadcast somewhere else, and we wouldn't even know about it. So I could be saying all sorts of hateful things right now, as an example. And so the idea is that AI is going to complicate the matter dramatically. The other idea, from my perspective, I say, okay, look, that's going to happen. It's going to be true. How can we then maintain sovereignty and kind of a custody chain, essentially, of the information that is ours specifically, and that we generate? And another side of this, by the way, is intellectual property. So IP, as you create a show, very successful podcasts, and a number of other ventures. Your intellectual property is very important to you, and as it should be. The idea is that in an AI world, as models get trained, they're going to be getting, and policy needs to be determined on this. But as models get trained, they're going to be trained on things that you created. And will you get any attribution? Will you get anything from that? A year or two or 10 from now? So all those areas are things that we need to focus on. And so that's, these are the kinds of things that we want to tackle with Kynismos.
Interesting. Really interesting. So I guess let's lead into that then. But let's go from a two-pronged attack then. So obviously these are things that aren't new. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I was getting the spam messages with the dodgy link and Instagram and stuff that could take your password and hack into your account and everything. And then they send a load of messages out to your friends and all that. But yeah, it was always the message request. And then I think one day I kind of thought it was a big deal when I saw an Olympic champion have that happen and send me a message with that link. And I was like, oh my God, okay, so this is how it works. It's kind of a spider web, isn't it? And then luckily we get it sorted quickly, but then, the data, if there's something dodgy in that account, like a message or anything blackmail, and then it's a, whole different world. But this isn't new, is my point. AI is fairly new. I mean, it's no disrespect to the people who are innovating in the sector and stuff, but it's still in its infancy. It's going to get a whole lot bigger. So can you maybe kind of give us a little bit of an insight into how bad AI could affect this, and then on the flip side of that, how good AI, for example, what you're creating, and pitch us on that as well, how that can prevent that or kind of rectify that situation, or just help us avoid bad AI effects in this sector?
Well, okay, so that's a great way to phrase it, and because the nice thing about that kind of phrasing is that we're saying let's polarize it just as an exercise. Let's create, there's black and white, there's the good and there's the bad. So if we wanted to create a bad AI, what would we do? I think we would do the same practices that we're using today to train models to understand behavior, to understand kind of the world around us in the best way we can, then to create generative AI that can then generate anything that we want to based on our own agenda, let's say, as an example. So that's an execution of bad AI wouldn't be that far off from what they're the same core technology. But then when we expand that technology out, or the application of that technology will determine, I guess it's very Nietzschean maybe. And I'm not a philosophy scholar by any stretch, but the idea that, in some sense with AI, we're staring into an abyss. And as we stare into it, it stares back into us. And I think that, it's a nice metaphor to look at AI in that regard. The idea is that, there's of course, there's a deep, dark side to it. On the other hand, it's an incredible utility for good. So examples would be, let's just look at, it doesn't have to be a state actor, because I guess I would say this, as an industry, artificial intelligence, everything will be, what we consider hardcore AI, will start to kind of pervade everything. So the idea is that artificial intelligence, the software side, the models, the training, all that stuff. I happen to believe that at some point in the near future, and there's going to be multiple waves of this, and we've seen this before. It happened in all tech. Again, I've been around for over 30 years, been interested in tech for longer than that. And I've seen those patterns. The idea is that early on, we're going through this phase right now where proprietary AI and the differences will make a big difference, meaning that one innovation can make a massive difference. At some point in the near future, the software side will become a bit of a commodity. It'll be broadly available, and the nuances will start to play a role. And the hardware side will continue to drive that until such time that the hardware side also becomes a bit of a commodity, with small innovations continuing to create advantages. So ultimately, it'll be extremely pervasive. And then the application layer is where it starts to play. Who's using it for what purposes, under what circumstances. And so to go back to the actual question, which is, the black and white, bad AI, good AI, there will come a time in the not too distant future. And I'll say this. When I was doing briefings kind of for cybersecurity policy related things, I kind of looked at a 15-year time horizon and say, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, what are the benefits, all that kind of stuff for that, 15-year time horizon, and what sectors, what areas, how they mesh together, things like that. And so, in a 15-year time horizon, these things will be really well worked out, but it'll be such a different world than we have today, with the rise of robotics and the rise of AI and all of the ambient computing, ambient AI, maybe things like, the way to look at it would be something like that. So, but in the shorter term, that's where the good and the bad is going to really start to play out. The policies, the way we decide how we move forward. And so the bad, to finally answer the question, the bad AI can be extremely bad, meaning that it can turn our world upside down, because there's no reason why we today, knowing very little information about you, I could discover a mountain of information about you. I can clone you digitally, as an example. I can essentially, take that clone and effectively do things that, with that information, with the data, with your likeness, with all your IP, that you would have very little knowledge of or control of. So I can essentially co-opt your life and just turn it upside down as an individual. At a corporate level, the idea of maintaining privacy around trade secrets and things like that at a national level, meaning security level, again, secrets and anything that's compartmentalized information, things like that, that becomes extremely risky, because if we're using AI as a tool to execute defense, that they can basically find gaps, even air gaps, and leap those gaps. So the bottom line is that it could be catastrophic. It's as bad as any incredible tool, and nuclear power or nuclear bombs being the example that people use. And I think that it's a fairly apt one. So, but it could be that cataclysmic. And I can go on and on about this, but I'm not sure if I think it touches on the answer a little bit.
Yeah, that's scary. So I kind of want to dig into it a bit further and kind of, at least give the audience an idea of how bad this thing is. Because I guess with me, My dad is much more clued up about the whole security thing. He's got all the apps in his phone. He's got all the VPNs. He's got all of these different things going on, and I don't understand half of it. I just think my phone's going to protect me, right? And I go on, the website, and I just think, oh yeah, you have your cookies, man. What does it matter to me, kind of a thing. But I guess the real question is, you talk about the whole, turn your life upside down kind of a thing. I guess, what does that actually look like on the details thing? So, what can these people do to you on that kind of a personal level, and why should that matter to Tom, who lives in the village over here, who's got no Instagram profile or anything, and probably thinks that no one cares about me? Why would these people have anything to do with me? I live in the Barrington village, and I walk my dog in the evening, and I go to commute and have a beer with the lads on a Tuesday evening. Why does that matter to him? Why should it matter to me? Kind of a thing.
Well, it's okay. So that's a great question. So if you look at it from this perspective, you say, okay, well, let's just look at it from a cybersecurity perspective to start with, and say, okay, well, and again, I'm focusing on AI as an enabling. It's more of a lubricant than anything else. It's an enabling technology that allows for the more effective execution of multiple types of cyber attacks, and it also enables new types of cyber attacks that didn't exist before, more cognitive war type cyber attacks. So, for example, influencing thinking, as an example, influencing policy and influencing local thinking. I mean, it's not hard to, and we're seeing this again. I tend not to be very partisan with my politics. I don't think that's healthy in general as a society, but certainly we're seeing all this amped up. So, from one level, in that community, you're going to start to see polarized viewpoints that are not necessarily well informed, but they're also easily manipulated. So that's an example that AI can basically light a fire, or rather add fuel to a fire that already exists. That's one kind of high level abstract example. More concretely, AI can very, very easily, again, when we talk about cybersecurity, let's just say someone executes a denial of service type of attack, or attacks the infrastructure. Let's just say attacks power infrastructure in that town. All of a sudden, your emergency services and your utilities essentially are gone, or there's an explosion at a power generation facility, and things like that. Actual kinetic war, based on at a very, very low cost. Essentially, no consequence, no attribution, and almost no cost. Anyone could do it. So it's that kind of stuff where it can get kind of scary for everyone. And so then that's where I think that, hopefully what we're doing with Kynismos and a number of other players just the policy in general has to move in this direction. We really have to be thinking of this stuff and taking it seriously, much more seriously than we took it for social media. I think social media, we let go too far. And I'm not about restricting it. I'm just about having developed it, taking an alternative reality in a sense, and have developed it in a way that didn't have to be what it is today. And that's what the hope now. I think we're early enough now that we can actually make that difference. And I'll be damned if I don't do my best to try to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know anyone in my immediate circle, and I've got, I know quite a few people, I'd like to say. I don't know anyone who's had this really happen to them. I know people who've made mistakes with stuff they shared on the internet with fake accounts and stuff, and then that's got turned around on them and blackmailed and everything. That's just run-of-the-mill stuff. But what you're talking about here is a much more intricate, tactical, kind of cynical level of this sort of a thing. And I just I don't know anyone who's had that happen to them. So I've got to ask the question then, because obviously, COVID was a news report of something that happened in a test lab in Wuhan, and then it came home, and then I was in lockdown a couple of months later. So you hear the first story, and then these things can spread like wildfire. So I guess the question is this happening already? How big scale is it? And when's it going to be a bit of a flood in the system and a massive problem, do you think?
Well, that's a really interesting perspective. The idea that, if we don't feel it personally, and we don't feel, the world changes kind of slowly. So we're a little bit of the frog in the pot, a little bit. At the same time, because it is a very different world today than it was. I mean, you never had to worry about being doxxed historically. That was never a thing. And if you're a teenager, thank God we're not. That's a tough life today. I mean, you're always on. I mean, everywhere you go, there's, the smallest thing you say or do, if it gets caught on video, you could be toast just for saying the wrong thing or getting in with the wrong people or pissing off the wrong people. So that, that in itself is a different, we didn't grow up in that world. Again, you're younger than I am. I presume you certainly look younger than I am.
22.
Yeah. Okay. But you probably grew up with some of that as well, but now it's fever pitch. And so, the lives of young people are so fundamentally different than they were for us. That's one example. Another example is that, I think the virus is a good example of that, where it is happening right now. The idea is, there's this concept called. I noticed, by the way, and I know that just watching some of your work, you have a very close affinity with a lot of the the various military branches, and you just love high performance thinking in general and execution in general. And so you may be familiar with this term gray zone conflict. And the idea there is that we are very deeply in a gray zone, conflicted environment right now globally, and by we, again, it depends on what. It doesn't matter. It's not necessarily a matter of it's not polar, not not individual, one side versus the other, but it's multipolar. And the gray there in that gray zone is that both in terms of severity, it's not kinetic. Though now, if you asked 5 years ago, would it ever go kinetic in the near future? We wouldn't conceive of, or rather, those who thought that who were well informed thought there may be flashpoints, Ukraine or right now what's happening in the Middle East, but never really conceived of it as this is going to happen. And now here we're living in that world. So things have evolved and changed, and to a large degree, those that's what we're calling gray zone conflict that's turning into hot zones, into actual kinetic war. But there's an example where that's an information war more than anything else. Those are information wars, and they're affecting policy, they're affecting sentiment, they're affecting a whole bunch of different aspects of human society that ultimately lead to. They're not directly connected. You could, if you need scholars to be able to draw, or AI in this case, to be able to draw the connection between some of these things. But the truth is that these things are leading to some very real consequences. And finally, I would say that, if you're in a conflict zone, specifically, let's say Ukraine or Russia, and what's happening, in that region, we're seeing AI, we're seeing robotics, we're seeing advanced technology playing a very important role in the battlefield, a decisive role in some sense on the battlefield. And, with that, those, again, it's the enabling technologies, and then who's behind it, turn it around. And if it's against the good guys, however you want to turn, everyone considers themselves the good guys is the hope. But if tables turn and they're against us, for example, whoever us is, then it's not so good. And it becomes an asymmetric advantage to the adversary. So these are things that, though they do seem detached, the world, as we connect it more and more, you pull on one thread, you're kind of obliquely tugging on all the rest. And so that's kind of how I see it at this point.
Quick ad break here, guys. Just want to introduce you to Shopify. Shopify is the all-in-one e-commerce platform that runs basically everything I'm doing, from my personal websites, my business websites. It truly is a phenomenal system, and I have a way for you guys to get started today for just £1 building your business, whether that's personal brand, whether that's e-commerce, whether that's a blog. It has everything. It has its own app store that can get you basically every feature you could expect from an online store, and it really just works out of a fantastic all-in-one system, which I can only highly recommend enough. And you guys can start for just £1 today. It's an incredible offer. Absolutely amazing. And the link to that is in the bio, or I'll put it up in the tab at the top. I think it'll be top right at the screen for you guys right now. So yeah, guys, check it out. Make sure to get this offer, and yeah, get started. It's fantastic. Right, I see. So I guess the big question really then is, how does Kynismos AI help? What does it do? What is it? And how can we get involved, I guess?
Well, so that's an interesting question, because it's forming as we speak. To a large degree, we have a very big vision. We have very ambitious goals, but we know we have science to prove to some degree, and we also have engineering to solve for in full execution of the mission. And so our goal is to basically make the future and take it in a different direction from what we did with social media and create a future where AI is an enabling tool for individuals, for enterprises, for governments, for policy, for basically for all of society. Make it a public good by essentially making it private and secure. At the same time, making sure that that sovereignty and custody of information and data and what we're calling knowledge is retained and attributable rather to the individual and or the individual entity, the node. Well, if we're taking of people as nodes, the individual node that where it was generated. And similar, and so in some sense, here's how I would describe it. Kynismos is essentially a security layer for a gateway, let's say, for all human and AI interaction. The goal is to create that gateway so that we, as individuals and as humans, can interact with AI in such a way where it's safe, secure, private, and we can get the benefit of it without having to worry about all the consequential challenges that security challenges, privacy challenges that are posed. So it's that gateway to start with. And how we're going to do it is, that's some of the engineering and the science that needs to be proven out. But basically, we're looking to use advanced cryptography, homomorphic encryption as an example. Use zero knowledge proof, use a blockchain-like technology for that attribution, but maintain what we're calling the gnosis core. The gnosis core is where all the knowledge embeddings happen within, and that's a separate AI from what we're calling the coherence layer. And the coherence layer is again another AI that interacts with the outside world. It's decoupled from the gnosis core so that those, I can go into the technical details, but essentially the coherence layer and the gnosis core interact with each other, but in a decoupled way. So, kind of using advanced cryptography and things like that. To then be able to allow for the individual to interact with any AI system that's out there, meaning no matter what language model, we're seeing a lot of language models become open source. I think that's fantastic. I think it's the right way to go. And that leaves an opportunity for us to be able to, stitch all that together and become the security layer for all of it. So you as an individual are assured that what you do is private and secure and not have to worry about any of the negative consequences of that, while you, your kids and your family can be safe and get the best. And the other side of it is there is a accidental happy accident essentially that's evolved from our thinking, which is that, sometimes the best stuff maybe you don't even intend for, but we discovered that we'll be able to work across multiple models concurrently and simultaneously. So if you have an inquiry, if you're kind of using an artificial intelligence system or multiple systems, you can basically get the best answer for whatever the inquiry is or whatever the work is from multiple AIs, and you can have your coherence layer essentially parsing that in conjunction with the gnosis core to create a better answer for you specifically. Because the gnosis core will know you extremely well, but that'll be a secure enclave, and it'll know everything about you effectively just because you're interacting with it. And that's why security plays a critical role. So AI, the universe of AI will be your servant effectively. It's a long answer.
Wow.
That's the basics.
That's the basics.
Well, it can go really deep. It can go really deep. And so, yeah, that's the top level. Having said that, we are working on an MVP right now, which is a much more humble expression of all that. So, MVPs, we want to go to partners with MVPs. We want to go to any company that cares about privacy and security, whether okay, here's an example. We heard that the CEO of Telegram was just arrested in France. I know nothing about the details of that case, and I assume the French government has no ill intent there, but it is scary just to hear that's even a possibility. Telegram is a privacy-minded platform with 900 million users, and so there's an example of real tension and real consequence, based on this idea of privacy and security and how it either is or isn't being executed well, intentionally or maliciously. I guess we don't really know, but yeah. So it's a pretty deep, but the kind of partners we'd love to work with. Maybe Telegram may or may not be that. It depends how this case works out and what's happening there. But it's platforms like that, or like even WhatsApp. I mean, really, basically any platform that requires or that cares about you and privacy, we want to work with.
I see. I'm with you.
DuckDuckGo, things like that.
It's crazy. Wow, what a world we're in. It makes me just wonder. I know it's a slightly deep question and everything, but is a life, just people looking at their futures and stuff now, where everything is going and all that. Do you think a life just off the grid and just turning the phone off, turning the TV off, turning all that off, and just playing guitar and going into the woods and setting up a log cabin? Do you think that's a better life, or do you think actually where we're going with all this is actually a good place? I can't tell. I really can't tell.
Wow, it's a beautiful question, actually. I said early on, I can think of myself as an artist, not more than a business person or an engineer or anything like that. I think of myself as an artist because for and it's really, that is the heart of the issue. What are we as humans, and what is life really? And it's we know one thing, that it's short. And so how can we enjoy the best life while at the same time adhering to whatever principles that we have? I think that's the other part of it. And I think when we start to think of principles, that's where the question becomes complicated, because we probably, you, like most of us, probably care about other people, and we want to do what we can. What you do is a very social thing. And you're providing a social good by bringing ideas and people together and inspiring people. And that's really important stuff. And so it's contradictory to the idea. You can live in the middle of the woods and continue to do what you're doing, but at the same time, now that's a technology enabled unifier. So you're both living in the middle of the woods, but the technology is coming into your place of residence, into your existence. So I think it may be hard in this day and age, or in the near future, to actually get away from it. So you almost, and that sounds like that could go dark. It can go dark to even think that, actually. And this is, again, that's the exact reason why I feel like what we're trying to do at Kynismos is I believe, so very important, because I don't think any human being anywhere on this planet, or any other that we happen to move to, if that's a reality within any, next 100, 200 years, we'll be able to escape technology. I mean, that's going to be a core part of, we're evolving along with it. I mean, it's actually kind of accelerating our evolution to some degree as well. So, and then the one other thing I would say there is that in the not too distant future, the next generation of young people will grow up with neural implants as just a natural thing that you do. Augmentation, physical, mental augmentation, as just a thing that you do. So they may be even more tightly woven together. And gosh, we better get that right, because if we don't, it can be extremely dark. On the other hand, it can be extremely beautiful. So we're wrestling with some really philosophical issues in our lifetime. I mean, probably the most interesting time maybe ever, in fact.
I just feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. Like, we've had this sort of we've had a bumpy road throughout history, haven't we? So much has happened, and so many bad things, so many good things, and all of that. And it just feels like, I don't know, is this just another one of those bumps in the road? Like if you go for a run in the country or something, you got the hills, you got the slopes and stuff. Is AI just going to be another slope or a downhill, or is this going to be the steep drop off a cliff, or is it going to be the mountain you get to climb? I don't know. Is this so much of a game changer that it could literally be like life will never ever be the same again, like it is nowadays? Or looking back on this podcast in 10 years time, are we going to think, wish we could go back there, it's too late now? Or do you think it's just another one of those things that just comes along the river of what is the human experience, I guess, on this planet?
Well, so if you went back 10 years and you talked about social media in the same way, I think there was that question. It's like, it's a fad. It's not going to stay. It's not going to really gain traction. Maybe 12 years, maybe, but around that time frame. So reality is, and that's one indicator. And I think, unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at this. I guess I would say this. I happen to think that this is such a massive game changer. Because it's not just AI as we know it today, large language models, machine learning, things like that, robotics, computer vision, computer senses, remote sensing. Beyond that, neural implants, and then beyond that, just synthetic biology. All those will start to play. Those will integrate more and more. We're coming into a world that's irreversible unless some catastrophic thing happens. Which I think that's the fear, is that we create something catastrophic, but if we don't, we still need to really. I think the difference is this. I think this time we have to be, for the first time, humanity has to kind of really grow and become an adult. Take the adult perspective as a whole, but not necessarily collectively, but as a whole, we need to show up in ways that we never have before. And it's not about regulation. I don't think it's about controlling, putting the genie back in the bottle. I don't think that's the answer, but I think it's about extremely ethical, extremely genuine, honest, soul searching in terms of let's just do this right. Let's just not put that little back door. Let's not do that little thing that's kind of not that big a deal now that will magnify into a monster.
So how can we do that on the
yeah, so I
individual
think
level?
that's
So, you, me, someone else, someone listening to the podcast, someone who doesn't think that their opinion or their actions really make that much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. What can we do to improve that future right now?
so I think that's a really it's an important issue. And so I think that some of the things we could do as individuals is that we can accept that be skeptical. Be skeptical, but without being pessimistic. I think that's an important thing. Know that there will be, that's a tricky balance too. I think, that's where, the adult concept comes from. The idea is like, okay, you can be skeptical and you can be, very cynical and very realistic about what the truth is without being pessimistic, because you don't have to be. I think it's just a matter of taking the information in and making something good of it. But that takes orders of magnitude more energy. And that's the challenge, right? Everyone's really busy. It takes more energy than to just kind of sit back and say, it's not, I can't worry about this. I got to put it out of my mind. But what you can do is you can be skeptical without being cynical, or without being pessimistic. So that's, if nothing else, I would say that that's one thing we ought to do. Don't trust anything you hear or that you see directly without questioning it. Question everything, but don't be negative about it. Just see it for what it is. It's just information.
Yeah.
Do something positive with it. That might be the one thing we could do.
I think one thing I want to interject there actually is that, oh God, I can't remember who it was exactly, but I think it was maybe 2-3 episodes back. We came across a part of the conversation where we kind of rounded it off by basically saying that you can be vigilant without being pessimistic, right? That's the world that we live in, and that's correct. You don't have to be the person who, hides in the nuclear bunker in their garden all day, every day to be safe and be vigilant, because all these things, like we spoke about earlier, I guess, with the whole cyber attacks and having your identity stolen, taken, used, it's not at home until it is, right? So until it happens to you or happens to someone else, you don't take it seriously enough as it is. But I guess the last thing I kind of want to ask then is kind of debunking a few myths then, before we get into kind of shameless plug and just where we can find more about you.
Sure.
But if we debunk a bit of do a bit of myth busting here, really, so what's a fad, what's not a fad right now? So going into this world, every single time we get something new come up, we have these companies, we have these products, we have these things where people promise the world and say this does this and this is going to do this and this is going to protect you, and all that, all these apps, all these devices, all of these different things, that, just to name a few of them, the VPNs, the RFID wallets, all these kind of like things. I guess in the kind of world of data security, privacy, not having these horrible things happen to you on an individual level, what's a fad? What works? What should people do? That's not going to kind of, put them in a nuclear bunker, like we kind of said, but also give them that security side of things.
Well, God, that's a great one. So from a fad perspective, I think macro level, I think that we look at, here's what I think. I think the idea of large language models being the be all and end all of artificial intelligence, it's generally, I think, conceived of, well, large language models are redefining everything. And in reality, I don't believe that. I don't think that that's true at all. In fact, I think they're just very sophisticated databases, effectively, is what they really are. Extremely sophisticated databases, make great inferences, and can do, they can do extraordinary things. But I would say, and they're going to be useful, they're going to be a utility, but they're not going to replace. So I think the one thing we could do is not worry about them too much. I don't think they're going to be replacing everyone's job, large language models specifically. Having said that, and the other side of it is, I'm not sure if I'm answering the question directly, but I'll say this as well. The other side of it is, I think, specifically when it comes to AI, I believe that we are going to just create a whole new set of skills. I wouldn't be worried about losing my job. I'd be worried about learning new tools. That's for sure. But I wouldn't be worried about, mass unemployment as a result of AI. I think it's going to be more that, we're going to have to learn new skills. The economies are going to shift to some degree. So those are real things. But to the question, I think that fads right now are, the jury to me is out on immersive reality, kind of all the, the goggles and all that kind of stuff. I still think the form factors have to go a long way before they're really anything of any value. I mean, I think in a corporate world, for many medical, I think many applications, Battlefield, certainly, those are great solutions for places like that. But the daily life, I don't think that's going to be real, that real a thing for a very long time. And by the time that happens, I think some form of neural connection of some kind may supersede it, or may kind of ultimately do that leapfrog. I'm a big believer in that, good or bad. I'm not sure. I think mixed feelings about it. So I think that mixed reality, augmented reality, the goggles, the devices, I think those are going to be they're going to be a passing fad for sure.
And on the flip side of the fad thing, then, what's a necessary thing to have nowadays, and that personal protection thing? Because, I guess you can get lost in the whole, go on the App Store and search up this kind of, privacy, data, whatever, security, virus, antivirus, all these kind of things. What's useless, what's a must have nowadays, I guess, going into the future?
Well, I think that the greatest tool we have, I think we touched on earlier, and I'm joking when I say this, but it's actually true as well. I think skepticism is probably our greatest tool. It's built into the human operating system. We should be aware of that and implement it in everything that we do. So I think if anything, not the hardware, the software, it's the skepticism. That would be the best tool that we have. Having said that, from a protective perspective, I think discretion might be the other thing. Just be aware of what all behaviors. I think technology is moving faster than we can accommodate as individuals. There's just no way to keep up as an individual. There's just no way. So I think the key would be know who you are, have very, considered values in terms of how you interact in the world and how you want to be perceived in the world. And, it's another, I guess I put it this way, it's kind of that sixth sense that we have to have. We have to evolve our internet sense, or whatever you want to, our information sense. Maybe that's what it is. It's, evolving our information sense, becoming attuned to that, because I think that we do have it.
I like it. Really good point.
I'm not sure if that answers the question. Okay,
no,
good.
It does answer the question. It's so true. I completely agree with that. It is really the sixth sense. So if someone comes from, I guess, someone listening to the podcast is probably a great place to start with something like that. But if you were going out of here thinking, hey, I want to, develop a bit of what that skepticism is, but I don't know what that looks like. What am I looking for? How do I develop that intuition? And, my, grandma or something still has to kind of ask about, hey, does the email with the 50 million deposit thing in some Eastern European country, is that real? Yeah. So I guess, where do you go from a talk like this to learn more about the subject? And also, I mean, let's kind of shameless plug away. Where do we find out more about you? Do you talk about this stuff regularly? Where can we find those talks? Social media? Yeah, kind of run us through it.
Well, it's interesting. So a couple of things. So where to go for people to learn about those kinds of things? I think EFF.org is an incredible resource, an underutilized resource. So I'd highly recommend going to EFF.org, the Electronic Frontier Federation. They've been around for a long time. They're credible. They really stay on top of things when it comes to privacy, security, human sovereignty, all the policy issues. They're really great. So that's one place I would endorse them anytime. They're amazing. So that's EFF.org. They're amazing. So as far as Kynismos is concerned, we are very, very early. And I myself I tend to be, we said earlier, going into the middle of the woods and living there, I tend to be a very private person. And so I've avoided the press as much as I possibly can. But at the same time, to me, I absolutely love it because it's a real conversation. So I'm just starting to engage in these kinds of conversations. Kynismos itself it's an early stage company. It's we're actually doing a fundraise right now, a very, very small one, actually. We're raising 1.5 million right now, just to do what we're calling a pre-seed round, just to kind of get that proof of concept, beyond proof of concept, a minimum viable product, so that we can interact with those potential partners that we'd hopefully be opening the doors for in the next couple of months, and start to build that. So other than that, we have a website, kynismos.ai, kynismos.ai. We can be found on X, of course, Kynismos.ai, and I'm on LinkedIn. You can easily find me there. And we need to establish more of a social media presence as well as things start to evolve. But in the next few months, we're going to see some pretty quick, rapid revolutions around what we're creating. So we're just excited. We're just excited. First of all, this is exciting to me, getting to talk about this stuff. So
No, that's exciting to me too. This has been such an incredible talk. I've learned a load, and my mind is kind of blown right now. I've really enjoyed it, and I guess the last kind of question that we tend to ask on the show nowadays is kind of a new tradition, really, is something down on the personal level. So if you found a young you, 12, 13 years old, kind of running around the streets, and you had that moment, you got in the time machine, and you went back and you found him, you had a moment to whisper in his ear a little bit of advice for the journey ahead, what would you want to tell a young version of you, I guess?
That's a great question. I mean, outside of grabbing him by the ear and telling him, because he probably wouldn't listen. Outside of that, I think it's funny because I think I would tell him to recognize that not that different than everyone else out there. Everyone's going through the same kind of stuff, for one, kind of very on a human level. That everything's going to work out. Just continue to follow the heart more than you follow the advice of others. At the same time, listen to people extremely carefully and let what they say actually sink in, like really sit with what you're hearing. But don't take it as seriously as you take your own counsel. Trust your gut, trust your instinct. But sit with things. Don't just make rapid decisions on things. So I think something like that, I would just kind of deliberate. That will be the strongest asset you have, is actual deliberation, and then asking, iteratively asking questions. Just getting the wisdom of other people. Right. Something like that. He wouldn't listen, but I would tell him anyways.
Oh God. Well, I mean, that's just young us though, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Sure is.
Man. I've loved this. This has been a great chat. And honestly, all I can say really is just thank you so much for joining me today for the Talk4 podcast, Andrew. Honestly, been an absolute pleasure having you on. And I feel like this is one of those ones that we're going to have a round 2 or round 3, 4, 5 well into the future. And I'm looking forward to those ones.
Anytime. I would love to. Louis, this is great. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed this. And now you got me thinking as well. And so I think we're going to need a round 2 or 3. So
hell yeah.
Anytime. Let me know.
Damn right. I'm going to be keeping tabs on all the stuff that you're doing. But yeah, no, absolute honor, absolute pleasure. Thanks for coming on. It's just been great. I've loved it.
I have as well. Thank you so much, Louis.
You're very welcome. And thank you guys for listening in today. This has been episode 119. And if you'd like to listen to the past episodes, go and have a look at the channel. And if you'd like to listen in for the future ones too, make sure to hit the subscribe button and spread some love by leaving a like and a comment. Let me know what you thought. Fights on. See you next time, people. Good night.